Our son wished he could be here tonight, but he had a prior engagement. 9 months ago, on May 2nd, Zach and his fiancée, Ainsley, along with their family, flew down to St. Bart's in the Caribbean to plan their wedding. Their lives seemed perfect at the time. Zach was a very healthy 30-year-old, living a dream life with a wonderful fiancée, successful career, and a great group of friends. A week later, while Zach was working in one bedroom at the house, he stood up from his desk, started to sweat, developed a severe migraine, and suddenly lost his ability to see or move the right side of his body. He panicked and crawled into the bathroom, splashed cold water on his face, and called to Ainsley for help. He had no idea he was having a stroke, but he knew something was terribly wrong. An ambulance rushed him to St. Bart's, where he was given a CAT scan that revealed an 8-centimeter hemorrhage on the left side of his brain. With no neurologist on staff, they had to immediately fly him to a larger hospital in Guadalupe, but he couldn't be accompanied by anybody because of COVID. Zach arrived in Guadalupe alone, afraid, and in excruciating pain, not to mention being surrounded by a staff that didn't speak English, only French. Within minutes of Zach's stroke, we received a phone call from his fiancée, Ainsley, to alert us as to what happened. I can't describe the fear and panic that occurs when you get a call about your child. Here we are thousands of miles away with no idea what we would do next. We felt as though his survival was in our hands, and we didn't know if the next call we received would be telling us he died. Fortunately, my wife was familiar with the work of the B Foundation because her sister is a close friend of the Sedney family. As you know, Jenny is the inspiration to the foundation of the B Foundation. I was able to connect with Christine through Jane's sister. We were lucky Christine that day was in a meeting with the Foundation Advisory Board. After mentioning Zach's emergency at the meeting, the universal message was to get him out of there, get him to the U.S. for treatment as soon as possible. It turned out one of their neurosurgeon advisors, Dr. Pascal Jabbar, who speaks fluent French, offered to work with us to get Zach out of Guadalupe and into the U.S. for treatment. He was able to connect with the local doctors who had actually refused to take our calls. Meanwhile, the B Foundation Advisory Board and team worked amazingly fast to find the nearest and best surgeon to help Zach. They contacted Dr. Robert Stark at Jackson Memorial Hospital in Miami, who arranged for him to be admitted as his patient. At the same time, we scrambled to find a medevac company to get him to Miami. When Guadalupe doctors performed another, more advanced scan of Zach's brain, it revealed a ruptured AVM, an aneurysm, and a significant hemorrhage, which would require complex surgery. Dr. Jabbar urged the local doctors to send Zach to the U.S. as soon as possible for treatment. If he hadn't talked to them, they were going to refuse to release him to our medevac flight that was going to arrive the next day. I flew to Miami to await the arrival of Zach. It's hard to describe how you feel while waiting to see your son, not knowing how he would respond or if he was even going to survive. When he arrived, he was immediately placed in the neuro ICU unit. The first time I saw him, I was shocked at how much pain he was in, even though he was on maximum dosage of painkillers. You feel so helpless, but when I said I wished I could take on his pain for him, he looked at me with steely eyes and said, "Dad, you couldn't handle it." I knew then that he still had some fighting spirit left in him. The next day, after an angiogram, Dr. Stark walked us through the options. Zach was in such great pain, he had no idea what we were talking about. Dr. Stark suggested they seal the area and then remove the AVM and aneurysm as the best course of action to prevent any reoccurrence of the brain. Most importantly, Dr. Stark gave us such confidence in his ability, we never doubted that that was the right course of treatment. Within a week, Zach had 2 angiograms, a surgical embolization of the aneurysm and AVM, a craniotomy to remove the aneurysm and the AVM. Well, I came through with flying colors. The pain was unending for the 12 days he was in the hospital, even with pain medication. In order to be strong for my son and be able to function myself, I could not think about any possibility but his full recovery. It took over a month of recovery in Miami before Zach and Yezzi were able to fly back to their New York City apartment. Zach is still working hard on his recovery. Recovery is not a quick or a straight line process. He had some setbacks along the way. 3 months after the surgery, it was determined that he was having seizures. With those seizures, when it hit him, he was not able to recognize himself when he looked in a mirror. He thought he saw an alien, and he was terrified. It was not easy to see him dealing with that kind of terror and not being able to help. He's now on seizure medication to control them. The seizures are still an issue, but less severe but still occurring as they try to find the right dosage of medicine. He doesn't have the same stamina or energy he had before the hemorrhage. He and Yezzi both have PTSD as a result of the trauma caused by the brain injury. Zach is back to work, and they are planning their wedding for April, but their lives are still far from normal. We can't help but think that the entire situation could have been avoided, since we've known for a long time that my family history has a history of aneurysms. My grandmother had a stroke in her 30s. My aunt died from an aneurysm. For years, Zach and I have been telling physicians during checkups about our family history, and yet not a single doctor has suggested that we do additional testing. I recently completed my own testing, found out I also have an aneurysm. An estimated 6 million people in the United States have an unruptured brain aneurysm, about 1 in 50. 30,000 people suffer a ruptured brain aneurysm each year, and about 40% of those ruptures result in death. Of those who survive, over 2/3 of the survivors have permanent brain damage. We are blessed that Zach is one of the very fortunate survivors of a brain hemorrhage, but most people will not have the connections we did to get the help. We hope in the future, with more awareness of the risk factors and symptoms of a brain aneurysm, there will be more stories with outcomes like Zach. If you take one thing away from this event, it's that this can happen to anyone at any time. So it's important to recognize the signs of a brain hemorrhage and be able to get them to the right place for treatment. After what happened to him, Zach wanted to make a difference and started a fundraising campaign soon after returning to New York City. He hoped raising money would allow the B Foundation to expand the support they can provide for research and increasing awareness of brain aneurysms. We hope that you will be generous tonight in supporting the work of the B Foundation. We know from personal experience it can make a difference in saving lives. Thank you.